Good morning. My name is Joe Parks. I am honored to serve as campus pastor here at New Life Northwest. And what a thrill it is to be with you guys. You're looking all festive and good looking today too, man. It's kind of nice. Got some actual winter weather this weekend, so you guys got to put your sweaters on and your nice coats, and you're looking good out there. I like it. Yeah. You can tell me I look good too if you want. That's fine. Today we are continuing in our Christmas series, Fear Not. Week one, what we did is we kind of looked at the fears that we have of really just looking at what God's will is for us in our lives. And then in the last week, actually, we talked about receiving miracles from God and really just facing some of our greatest fears and just going after our dreams, right? Following the star. It was so good. And so today, what we're going to do is we're going to talk about how do I get an answer from God? How do I get an answer from God? Let me just ask you this even. Let me see a show of hands. Do you have at least like one area in your life that you could use some direction from God in, maybe? Yeah, I do. For sure. And you know what? Here's the thing. If we don't know where we're going, if we don't know where we're headed, that can end up being a little scary, right? It could be, just picture yourself out in the middle of a field in Shafter on a foggy day, and you have no idea which way to go. That can be a little scary in a situation like that. I remember a few years ago, Cathleen experienced something like this with some really bad fog. She got into her car after church and began to head home, and as she got out on the road, she realized, oh my gosh, this is really, really bad, and she could barely see like a foot in front of her, so she could see the taillights of the car in front of her, and they were headed the same way, so she just kind of followed him behind this guy, like hopefully he can see the road better than I can, and they were going along the way for like 5 minutes, and all of a sudden this guy just comes to this abrupt stop, and so Kathleen slams on her brakes, and she rolls down her window, which, by the way, young people, this is how we used to roll down the window. Not this. And she stuck her hands out. I mean, you can picture Kathleen doing this. Like, hey, why did you stop like that? And at this point, the guy's already out of the car, and he steps out, and he goes, well, ma'am, this is my driveway. So if you don't know where you're going, get a little scary. You know what? The Christmas good news is Jesus is the light that will guide us. Whatever it is that we're facing, worries, fears, doubts, he wants to do that. And the key to getting an answer from God really comes down to one thing, and it is prayer. That's what it comes down to. And God wants to answer the prayers and give us direction for these different things that we have in our lives and in our families, in our careers, finances, you name it, he wants to be in on it, and he wants to be a part of it. So the way that you and I can get these answers from him is to have the right attitude. To have the right attitude. And so what we want to do today is we want to look at a few of these attitudes that you and I can have that will allow God to answer those prayers in our lives. What do you and I need to be willing to do in order for us to be able to hear those answers in that direction in our lives? So we're going to look at 4 of them. Here's the first one. If you're taking notes, it's in your outline. Be willing to let God answer in his own time. It's according to his schedule, right? Whatever he thinks is best. You ever notice that God delays his answers to our prayers sometimes? That happens. Why is that? Well, we see one reason in the Christmas story in Luke chapter 1. Notice how God delays this answer to this older couple. Luke chapter 1. Beginning in verse 11, Zacharias was in the sanctuary when suddenly an angel appeared standing at the right of the altar of incense. Zacharias was startled and terrified, but the angel said, "Do not be afraid. Fear not. Zacharias, for I have come to tell you that God has heard your prayer, and your wife Elizabeth will bear a son, and you will name him John. This angel comes to Zacharias and says, God has heard your prayer. And I am telling you right now, if an angel came to me and was like, Joe, just heads up, God has heard the prayer that you said, I would have been like, sweet, that is awesome. Thank you for the personal delivery. But that is not at all what Zacharias did. He was not into it at all. Look at his response. In verse 18, Zacharias said to the angel, this is impossible. I am an old man now, and my wife is also well along in years. You understand how that's translated, right? Zacharias is like the ultimate skeptic in this. And the deal is that he had stopped praying for this request many years prior to it. He had just given up. And so now he has this attitude, this heart of, it's impossible. This can't even happen. And the angel says, remember, don't be afraid, Zacchaeus, because God has heard your prayer. Heard it. Past tense. This has already happened. You see, there's no problem with our prayers getting to God like lightning quick, right? But sometimes there are these times that we are going to wait and God's answer that we want is delayed. And that drives us crazy. How many of you like delays in your life? Anybody? How many of you like waiting in line at the register at Walmart? Anyone here? No? How about those lines at the DMV? Those are fun, right? We love those. Yeah. We are not fans. How about this one? How many of you have children? Who have children in the house? Let me see everybody that's got kids. How about this one here? For all of you that have kids, you ask, or they want something in their lives, right? Like they need something, they want something from you, and you say, okay, not yet. Right? You use those words, not yet. How many of your children just go and sit patiently off to the side and wait for that time? Not. That does not happen, right? Like right before dinner, they want to eat a little cookie or something, and he's like, come on, let's have a cookie. And mom says, just not yet. And they throw themselves on the floor, right? Crying like it's the end of the world. I am never going to get this cookie. That's what happens. Listen, you know what the deal is? Immature people don't understand the difference between no and not yet. Children have a hard time grab a hold of that difference between no and not yet. And for you and I, listen, the mark of maturity as a Christ follower is this: how long can I wait? How long can I wait? If I'm spiritually mature, then I can wait. If I'm spiritually immature, I want it now. I want it right now, and if I don't get it right now, I'm going to throw a fit. Or I'm going to take matters into my own hands, and that's just going to make everything worse. Are you tracking with me? You say, Joe, why does God delay in answering our prayers? And it's usually because he needs to prepare us first. He needs to prepare us. He wants to bless us, but he needs to get us ready first. He wants to mature us just a little bit more. He wants to answer our prayers. But he's just kind of waiting for us to just grow up just a little bit more. And you know this? God is more interested in making you mature than making your life easy. That's his thing. See, he wants to help us in all of our situations, but God's number one priority is to make you more like Jesus. That's what he wants to do. So if you're having like financial difficulties, see, maybe God is saying, you know what? I just want you to develop the right attitude about money, and then I can help you out. Maybe there's some marriage difficulties, and God could be saying, you know what? I just need you to develop the right attitude towards your spouse, and then I can help you out. Maybe it's on the job, and things aren't going great at all. And maybe God then is saying, you know what? I just want you to develop the right attitude towards that demanding boss, and then I can help you out. God is never late. His timing is perfect. God's delays are not God's denials. No does not mean, or not yet does not mean no. We have to understand what God is saying. So, what do I do if I'm praying and I haven't gotten an answer? They've been delayed. How do I do it? How do I pray? You just keep on going. You keep on praying until one of three things happens. The first one, you keep praying until you get an answer. Or the second one, you pray until you get an assurance, right? That this is going to happen. right? That this is a not yet, but it will happen, right? This is exactly what Jesus is talking about in Mark chapter 11. Look at what he says. I tell you the truth, if anyone says to this mountain, go throw yourself into the sea, and does not doubt in his heart, but believes that what he says will happen, it will be done for him. Then watch this. Therefore I tell you, whatever you ask for in prayer, believe that you have received it, and it will be yours. You see that? You believe in advance. You get this assurance. Or the third thing, that you keep praying until basically God just reveals that it is not his will. That's what happens. We keep praying until you get an answer or an assurance or an absolutely not. We keep praying. What must we do? What must we be willing to do to hear an answer from God? The first one we said, be willing to let God answer in his own time. And then here's number 2, be willing to let God answer in his own way. Not only whenever is best, but however is best. I have discovered over the years that God's ways are better and bigger when we let him answer rather than doing it ourselves. Look at Isaiah 55, verse 8 and 9. This plan of mine is not what you would work out. Man, that's so eye-opening. Neither are my thoughts the same as yours. For just as the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than yours, my thoughts than yours. You see, God's plan for your life is probably bigger and better than what you're probably praying for right now. And sometimes that's why God delays in answering us. Think about this in our story. What would have happened here if God would have answered Elizabeth and Zechariah's request for a baby immediately? What would have happened? Well, they would have gotten a little boy or a little girl, and they would have loved, and you know what? That would have been good, but it wouldn't have been what was best. See, God had a different plan, and God delayed their request for a number of years so that he could give them and answer it with a son who was John the Baptist. John the Baptist, the cousin of Jesus Christ, the last Old Testament prophet, the only prophet to see the prophecies of Christ fulfilled. He was the forerunner of the Messiah. Because God delays this request, he didn't just give them a baby, he gave them John the Baptist. Incredible. And so we put this up on the screen, so if you want to write this down, you can. But look at this. Sometimes God doesn't answer when we want him to because he doesn't want to give us something good. He wants to give us something great. That's what he wants to do. And I am convinced, you guys, that we don't dream, that we don't pray, that we don't think big enough. We just don't. Too often we aim too low in life and in what God has for us. Look at Ephesians 3:20. God can do anything, you know. Here, will you read this one out loud with me? You ready? Go. God can do anything, you know, far more than you could ever imagine or guess or request in your wildest dreams. Hello. God says, you just go ahead and think of the greatest thing that you could think of in your wildest dreams, and I'll top that. That's what he wants to do. And I wonder if we're believing for God for bigger and better things for our church family's future. If God isn't smiling and going, come on, New Life Church, you guys can think bigger and better than that. You guys can get even more creative in that to impact this community with the gospel of Jesus Christ. We can do that. He says, just ask me and I will do it. And sometimes God doesn't answer when we want him to because he doesn't want to just give us something good. He wants to give us something great. Guys, aren't you glad that God doesn't answer all of your prayers? How many of you remember that song, Unanswered Prayers from Garth Brooks? Yes. Anybody? You guys remember that song? I was thinking maybe we could sing the chorus together. What do you think? Here we go. Sing with me now. Sometimes I thank God for unanswered prayers. Remember when you're talking to the man upstairs. Just because he don't answer doesn't mean he don't care. God's greatest gifts are unanswered prayers. You guys did so much better than the 9. So you just go ahead and tell everybody the 9 that you were fantastic. Listen, you're praying about a job change. You're praying about this, and suddenly this thing falls through. Don't sweat it. God's got a better idea. You're praying about a relationship, and it seems like things aren't getting better, that maybe they're getting worse. Trust in him and his ways. God has something better. He's going to work it out. You trust in him and his way and his timing. Maybe there's health problems and it doesn't seem like things are getting better. It actually seems like the pain is increasing. Don't sweat it. And I know that's easier said than done. But we trust in his way, his timing, that he will take care of us. Remember this, you guys. God always gives his best to those that leave the choice to him. And don't figure it out on them. Let God answer in his time and in his way. So for the rest of this message, please welcome to the stage, lost in the fog, Pastor Cathleen Parks.
Aren't you glad he's not on your worship team? That's so bad. So bad. When he said he was going to sing, I was like, that's not going to go very good. But I was teasing him earlier today because he mentioned the song Unanswered Prayers, and I was like, baby, I said, that song's perfect. Because remember, we played it at our wedding. Do you remember that? Why? And do you remember why we played it at our wedding, sweet love?
I think I do.
Do you think so? It's because God said no to you, Mary and Lisa. Boom! He got me instead. Congratulations. Bye-bye, Lisa. Oh, what? Oh, that's so funny. Okay, all right. Let's keep going. Next one. Be willing to let God answer in his own power. In other words, don't try to do it on your own. Don't try to do it on your own. I'm really bad at this, guys. I'm really bad at this. Like, God, I need you. God, if you could help me with, if you could give me the answer for. And then I just go like trying to figure it all out and make my plans and strategize and do all my things. And God's like, did you want my help? Because it doesn't look like you want my help. You kind of jumped right in there, Kathleen. I do it all the time. But our power isn't going to get us very far, right? But God's power can take us to that miraculous place of breakthrough where the very things that we're praying for, that we're hoping for, that we're needing, boom, miraculous, when we're leaning on his power and not our power. There's a really important truth that sometimes we overlook in the story of Zacharias and Elizabeth, and that is, and I will just preface by saying, I don't like this part. This is not my favorite. But the truth is that God often waits until something is humanly impossible before he steps in. I don't like that. I don't like that when God waits, because I'm like, hello, what are you doing? Do something. I mean, think it through. When did he give Zacharias, depends on which version you're reading, and Elizabeth their baby? He gave them their baby after it was humanly impossible for them to have one. They were in their 90s, y'all. Ew, that's gross. But that's when he gave them their baby. Same thing happened to another couple, Abraham and Sarah. You guys have heard that one, right? In Genesis 17th, God came to Abraham, and he's like, hey, Abraham, you are going to be the father of a great nation. And so Abraham waited, and then he waited, and then he waited. And he starts looking at, we're getting past the point that this is possible. We're getting past God said, but it's not happening. So we're getting past the point that this is possible, so we're going to help him out a little bit. Let's help out God a little bit. And Abraham goes and he gets another wife and he has a baby. It was disastrous. Why was it disastrous? It was not God's plan. God had a different plan for that. And so we have to wait, guys. We've got to wait for God to really do the things that he's wanting to do in our lives. Trust him that when it seems impossible, just because it seems impossible to us doesn't mean it's impossible for him. That's where he gets to show off. That's where he gets to really demonstrate who he is. That's where we get to know him even better, right? I mean, it's funny because Abraham, I love the way how in Romans, it's Romans 4:20. You guys have got it there. I love how it explains how Abraham responded at that moment that the angel is telling him, you're going to have a baby. It says this, he staggered. Everybody say staggered. Not at the promise of God through unbelief, but was strong in faith, giving glory to God. He staggered. He might have staggered because he was 99 years old and God's telling him he's about to have a baby. He might have staggered for that reason. And then Sarah overhears, right? And Sarah is going, and what does it say that Sarah did? When Sarah overhears they're going to have a baby, Sarah laughed. She's like, you've lost your mind. She is 90 years old. Girl had to laugh because if she wasn't laughing, she was going to be crying. Because I am telling you, at 90 years old, the idea of taking on 2-year-olds and teenagers again, no, I can't even imagine. But amen. But they did give them what they had asked for. They gave him this baby boy. He gave them this baby boy in his power. They didn't have to try to fix it. They messed it up when they tried to fix it. Do you hear that? They messed it up when they tried to fix it. It was pretty disastrous, actually, when they tried to fix it. It wasn't in their power. It was in God's power. Some of you are waiting on a situation that feels humanly impossible right now. Listen to that. Some of you are waiting for an impossible relationship to change, for an impossible job situation to change, for impossible finances to somehow work themselves out, for impossible things that you're dealing with in your own emotions and heart and mind to somehow work itself out. Hear what I'm saying. Listen. God wants to teach us how to stand in faith, how to walk in faith. God wants us to learn how to be strong in our faith in the midst of situations and things going on that seem and feel and look and are logically impossible. Learning to stand in that faith. And part of that too is not only is he growing us in the midst of that, but he will reveal himself even more to us in those moments. Do you know that? We will come to know who he is more when he answers. Does that make sense? Does that make sense, guys? So let me say, if things in your life right now are feeling out of control or crazy, or you just can't get that answer or whatever it is, it might be your time for a miracle. Don't give up. Don't give up praying. Hey, if God has said no, God has said no. But if God hasn't said no, don't give up praying. Don't give up seeking him. Don't give up. You might be right on the cusp of your miracle, right on the cusp of it. Don't give up. So be willing to let God answer in his own time, way, and power, and be willing to let God answer in his own for his own purpose. For his own purposes. In other words, it's not just whenever or however, it is whatever. Whatever you want, God, whatever you're doing, God, whatever. And he does that for 2 reasons. God answers our prayers. There's really 2 primary reasons that he answers those. One, for our growth, for our gain, for our benefit. God is answering our prayers, but also for his glory, so that he can be revealed in our lives and to the lives around us. God is doing it in 2 different ways. Think about it. I mean, isn't that those 2 reasons that he answered the prayers of Elizabeth and Zacharias? Think about it. He wanted to bless their lives, right? He wanted to bless their lives. He wanted to give them this child that they wanted. He wanted that for them. He wanted that blessing for them. He also needed John the Baptist for his glory, right? He needed John the Baptist. He had a purpose for this little boy. And again, these guys were old. They were past the age of having children. They didn't think it was going to happen. Why was God's timing so important on that? Number 1, because it wasn't possible, right? By their own doing, what they could do, 90 years old. It was not going to happen on their own power. So he revealed himself in that. Number two, why did that timing have to be that? Because the timing of John the Baptist's arrival had to line up with the timing of Jesus' arrival in order for John the Baptist to do what he was destined, what God had purposed him to do, which is to prepare the way for Jesus to be revealed as Christ, right? So all of it had to line up. God knew exactly what he was doing. They didn't know what he was doing. It didn't make any sense, but God knew exactly what he was doing. Our ability to be able to trust in God for those same things, that whatever is happening in our lives, he knows what is happening, he knows why it's happening, he knows our prayers, he knows our passions, he knows our heart's desires, and he's going to answer those accordingly. And sometimes it's going to be yes, and sometimes it's going to be wait, and sometimes it's going to be no. But he loves it. Look it. We love our kids, right? We want what's best for our kids, right? That means sometimes we have to say no. Or we have to say not now because you're not ready. You got some growing, you got some learning, you got some developing to do. You are not ready. And I'll give you an example. When I was little, my family, we didn't necessarily grow up in church, but there was a house that we lived in for a few years that my sister and I would always get on the little church bus that went down the street because they always gave you a goldfish every time when you came home. You always got a little bag of goldfish every time you rode the church bus. And they always gave you like a Snickers bar if you got saved. So I got saved every week. And every single week I got my Snickers bars and my goldfish. And so one week, my sister comes running in, and we were young, y'all. We were way young. My sister comes running in, and you could go from the front door and, like, fly through the house, and there was a slider, and go straight through the back door. And my sister comes she's running, and she's going, hallelujah, I'm saved, and I'm getting baptized. And boom, out the back door she goes. And my mother's like, what just happened? So she goes out there, and she says to my sister, she says, baby, you want to get baptized? And she says, yes, I do, Mama. And she says, okay. So what does baptism mean? And she said, they hold your head underwater until you see Jesus. And my mother said, that's death. No, that is not baptism. And so her answer was certainly not no, that my sister was never going to get baptized, but she wasn't ready, right? It wasn't the timing. She wasn't ready. She had some growing and some learning to do. And so sometimes God is saying to us, girl, you're not ready. You're not ready. So that's why we have to pray, right? How Jesus told us to pray, your kingdom come, your will be done, right? Right? So we're focusing in on that right thing. Let me ask you guys, do you trust God enough? And this is a rhetorical question, but really, do you trust him enough that no matter what the answer, no matter what the timing, no matter how it comes together, that you can trust that he's in it and he's for you? And he has a plan, and he has a purpose, and it's for your benefit, and it's for his glory, and you can rest. Because we get ourselves all worked up. It's real hard to rest sometimes, right? I will tell you, years ago, like 13, 14 years ago, I was working on staff at a church in Katy, Texas, and it was time. Joe and I had known for years that God was going to call us to start a church, and so we had been waiting for God to say, it's time, go, here it is. And God did. He's really spoke to our hearts, and it was time, and we knew it was time. And I'm on staff with this church. And so I told them, hey, this is what's going on, so I'm going to resign my position. They said, hey, can you stay for a few months and just help us in transition? I said, no problem, that's fine. One of the ladies at the church, her and her husband owned a construction company. So in January, because I stayed till the end of May, I stayed for 5 months. So in January, she said, hey, when you're done with this job in May, you want to come work at my construction company and do admin for me? And I was like, sure, didn't pray about it. Probably not the smartest thing ever. And so I said, sure, yeah, I'll do that. And so the Thursday before I was supposed to go to work for her, the first week of June, the Thursday before, she comes to me in my office and she says, hey, I'm going to release you from your obligation for working for my construction company. And I go, what? She goes, I'm releasing you from that obligation. I go, are you firing me before I get hired? She goes, no. But I'm releasing you from the obligation. Another friend of ours, Brenda, was the principal of a very large private Christian school in the area. And she said, Brenda called me today and asked if I would allow her to offer you a position at the school. And I said, Lynn, we've been talking about this since January. I'm not going to leave you out in the cold. She goes, I think you need to think about it. I think you need to pray about it. And I did, which I should have done probably in the beginning. I did, and it was absolutely without question, this was the direction that God wanted me to go. And listen, let me say to you, because that happened, God turned all those plans on me, right? He changed everything up at the very last minute, because that's what he does, right? He changed everything up. But because of that, I got to continue working in ministry, which is always my heart's greatest desire, always, always, always. And both of my girls got to grow up in that school. Allison went there from pre-K 3 through 11th grade until we moved here. Jessica started at kinder and graduated from there. That school they got an incredible education. That school tests out in the top 15 percentile in the nation. They got an incredible education, but here's what else happened. They spent their whole lives between church and home and school learning a biblical worldview, their whole lives. Jessica started in ministry at that school. What other school can you go to that you start leading worship in chapel in 8th grade and you start being mentored of how to lead people into worship? And that is her greatest heart's desire. It was for my benefit. It was for my children's benefit. It was for Joe's benefit. And it was for God's glory that all of that came together. Do you trust him when he slams the door in your face? When he says no, when he says wait, when he says go, and you go, I didn't want to go yet. You don't want to do that. Do you trust him? Psalms 138:8 says this, the Lord will fulfill his promise for me. Your love, O Lord, endures how long? Forever. Do not abandon the works of your hands. In other words, don't stop doing what you're doing. Don't stop doing what you're doing. Let me say this. When you pray and the request is not right, God says no. When you pray and you are not right, God says, grow. We got some stuff to work on. We got some changing to do. We're going to get you ready. Grow. When you pray and the timing is not right, God says, slow it down. There's some things to wait on here. I've got some things that I'm doing that are going to happen in the midst of all of this. Let's wait for it all to come together when it's supposed to come together. And when you pray and everything is right, God says, go. Let's do it. I really sense the Lord just saying to us this morning, guys, are you willing? Are you willing to surrender your plans to his plans? Are you willing to listen for his leading, to follow whatever direction he says to go in, even if it doesn't make sense, even if it seems impossible? Are you willing to trust him? Are you willing to say to him, change me? I'm willing to be changed. What do you want for me? What do you want from me? Change me. That's a hard one. Are you willing to recognize that not yet doesn't necessarily mean no? If God has said no, God has said no. If God hasn't said no, don't give up. Don't give up praying. Don't give up pursuing. Don't give up diving in. Don't give up. Don't give up. Don't give up. I get it. There are so many things over the course of time that Joe and I have prayed for that took a while. And some of those things have been answered or resolved, and some haven't. And there comes a point where you're like, why am I even praying about this anymore? I've been praying about this forever. If God didn't say no, you haven't prayed about it forever. You just prayed about it long enough now, and you just keep going, and you keep going, and you keep going until you get an answer or a breakthrough from the Lord. You don't give up. That is surrender. That is trust. That is faith. That is walking out faith. Lean in to the Holy Spirit. Lean in.